So we'll get started as more people are joining. Thank you for coming tonight to Crowd Conversations, a monthly virtual speaker series, which is focused on building a circular construction economy with deconstruction and building material reuse as important components of the paradigm shift from a linear to a circular economy. I'm Gretchen Worth. I am the project director of the Susan Christopherson Center for Community Planning, which helps New York State communities plan for more equitable, climate resilient built environment. The Christopherson Center is one of the founding partners of CROWD, which stands for Circularity, Reuse, Zero Waste Development, and we're the organizer of Crowd Conversations. I'm really pleased to welcome tonight's presenter, Steph Compton of Energy Justice Network in Baltimore, who has been instrumental in drafting deconstruction policy for the city of Baltimore, and Luna Oya, a crowd partner who will moderate today's session. Before we start, a couple of housekeeping details. We value your time, especially on a Monday evening. So we'll keep this conversation to an hour, including the Q&A. So please type your questions in the chat as we go along, and we'll get to those at the end. And please keep yourselves muted so everyone can hear the presentation. We're recording the session and we'll share that out to all of those who've registered for tonight's event. Our next crowd conversation will be April 1st with May Bowley of Repurpose Savannah, who's going to talk about her organization's women-centered deconstruction training. And so you can register for that online at the CROWD website. And so CROWD is a network of partners who came together in 2020 to work toward a more sustainable built environment in New York State. We're planners, architects, preservationists, municipal staff, salvage professionals, environmentalists, university faculty and students, and our numbers are growing. CROWD is working to create a circular construction economy in New York State that brings environmental, economic, and social benefits to all of our communities. And at the core of our efforts, we support and advocate for deconstruction and building material reuse rather than demolition of buildings and infrastructure and the creation of vast amounts of landfill waste. We're working on local and state policies and practices, research and analysis, education and community engagement, and equitable workforce development. You can get more information about us on our website, crowd.org, crowd with a 0. You can learn about our partners and their work, register for upcoming crowd events, sign up for our mailing list, download resource guides, or reach out to us for more information. And so I'd like to now introduce our moderator for this evening, Luna Oya. Luna is a materials analyst at Brightworks Sustainability. At Brightworks, she conducts life cycle analyses and consults construction projects on embodied carbon reduction strategies. In the reuse realm, Luna is a board member and data and policy committee co-chair for Build Reuse, a nonprofit and network of building material reuse advocates. Luna also convenes monthly with Reclaim, an informal New York City group interested in promoting building material reuse policy in New York City. So thank you, Luna.
Thank you, Gretchen. And I would like to start with a land acknowledgement. Ithaca is on the traditional homelands of the Gayokono, the Cayuga Nation. The Gayokono are members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, an alliance of 6 sovereign nations with a historic and contemporary presence on this land. The Confederacy precedes the establishment of Ithaca, New York State, and the United States of America. We acknowledge the painful history of Gayokono dispossession and honor the ongoing connection of Gayokono people, past and present, to these lands and waters. And next, I would like to introduce Steph Compton. Steph Compton is a Baltimore-based zero waste expert and works for the Energy Justice Network. She is an organizer of zero waste policies with the Clean Air Baltimore Coalition, and she has been community organizing and bringing stakeholders together for the past decade. Although Baltimore does not yet have a deconstruction ordinance in place, the city's landscape is ripe for local deconstruction ordinance, and Steph has been a driving force in pushing forward a proposed deconstruction ordinance called the Rebuild Act. Thanks to her efforts, the Rebuild Act was introduced in the summer of 2023 by Baltimore City Council member and local champion Odette Ramos. Steph, thank you so much for joining today. Please take it away.
All right, thanks for having me. I will start sharing my screen. All right, is it in full screen? You can see it good?
Yep, looks good.
Perfect, thank you so much. All right, thank you, Luna, for the introduction. Thank you, Gretchen, for the invitation, and to the crowd community for coming tonight. And thanks to all of you for joining me for this Monday evening. So I'm Steph Compton. I'm a zero-based policy program organizer in the city of Baltimore with Energy Justice Network, which is a national anti-incineration nonprofit. And then in the city of Baltimore is where I work to organize with the Clean Air Baltimore Coalition. So I am a Zero Waste USA associate and a true advisor. And for folks interested in learning more about zero waste and becoming trained and certified in zero waste programs, policies, and infrastructure, I recommend their go at your own pace training programs. It's my introduction into where I am now. So my passion is zero waste. And the biggest takeaway, I'm working on, there we go. The biggest takeaway in this huge undertaking of what zero waste means, taking the take, make, waste linear model, changing the system to allow for a circular stream. And so how to make it approachable for folks to understand that zero waste doesn't mean that there's no waste, but that there's a plan for where the waste goes. And more importantly, redefining the waste stream as the resource stream. Because if there's waste, then there are inefficiencies and missed opportunities in the management of resources and materials. So today I'll be giving an update on where we're at with the local organizing efforts for Deconstruction Ordinance in Baltimore, and lay out some of the history, how we got to where we are, and our plan for the future. And thanks for clarifying that we don't have an ordinance yet, but we are working on it. Some folks thought that we already did. So here is our timeline. There's a lot going on here, so feel free to avoid this screen. I'll be going over it in detail throughout the presentation, but this is what I've been doing in the 18 months that I've been working on this project since August of 2021. But there were a couple of things that already took place before I got here. So in 2018, the Baltimore City Deconstruction Project with Humanum, which was led by Details Deconstruction, was a project that took place in 2018. And then in 2020 through 2021, Mike of Energy Justice Network, he showed up to deliver comments on our Less Waste, Better Baltimore plan, and was able to put in a recommendation for a deconstruction requirement. And then later on in that same year, our colleague Dante Swinton, who is also the author of the Rebuild Act, he was selected to serve on Mayor Brandon Scott's transition team. So getting access to that, he was also able to officially recommend a deconstruction requirement. So that's the timeline since before I started, the things that were underway. And then afterwards, when I got onto the project, we started reaching out to some of the deconstruction experts. Dante is very proficient in research policy and researching policy. And so he had already found some of the cities that were already doing it and sampled some of the things that made sense to adopt here for a Baltimore policy. And that's where we got the Rebuild Act, taking inspiration from other cities that have ordinances. And then as soon as we started the work, right away, the Councilwoman Odette Ramos was an immediate champion, saying that she wants to jump forward and be the person that introduces this bill. So soon after, I started hosting stakeholders. And that was thanks to the expertise from Jeff Carroll, one of the first people I reached out to. He let me know who to reach out to and who to talk to first. Also want to give a huge shout out to CR0WD. She was the person that did a lot of the hard work and labor to get Portland, Oregon's ordinance. And she is the founder of the Reclamation Administration. And then in October of 2021, that was when I first attended the Build Reuse conference. And that's where I met a lot of lovely folks that I met here today. And I just can't recommend that organization enough. Build Reuse, also Luna is a part of, a great place to connect with people that are involved with this work and that have experience and collaborate and inspiration for where to start your work at. So Dave Bennick also was another one of those people I met there. I'll be talking more about him later. And then let's see, and also connections made with other city leaders. There's all types of folks, stakeholders that come to those conferences. They happened yearly, so I recommend getting involved with the Build Reuse group. So then I went on to host information sessions, and then I did one information session and then 5 stakeholder meetings monthly. And then simultaneously, there's a lot of moving pieces here. So there's being involved at the city government level, advocating to city leadership, being involved with the people that do the work. And so I started doing monthly and bi-monthly meetings with our DPW, the Department of Public Work directors, to discuss zero waste policies, programs, and infrastructure. So that's another critical piece is communicating with your city leadership. And then there was, right before our 3rd stakeholder meeting, there was a vacant house fire tragedy. I'll go into further later. And then in the spring of 2022, I partnered with Johns Hopkins, a nearby university, and I worked with students on a 6-week project to help develop surveys for stakeholders. And these were developed for manufacturing and production, reuse businesses, design schools, and then small business funders. So that was to survey capacity for how this passing of this bill would affect them and what they would anticipate. And so learning from those surveys, I learned that local reuse businesses, if a policy like the Rebuild Act were to pass, that they would be able to double their staff within a year of that passing. So that's what the survey was produced, worked with students. And that was also guided again by CR0WD Ali. She put forth some of the questions, and then I worked together with some students to further flesh out those surveys. And then I also networked with the Small Developers Collective just to meet with people, to talk about what I'm working on and to hear what they have to say about it and invite them to stakeholder meetings. And then something else that was really important in the work that I did was attending the planning department, our Department of Planning, our Baltimore community planning sessions. So they're planning out this vision for the next 10 years on 20 different topics. And I showed up to advocate for zero waste policies. I showed up to represent for environmental justice, for workforce development, for community development. And so that was also a big thing to do, was show up to city meetings and offer my expertise and recommendations on zero waste. That's also where I learned by going to those meetings that Baltimore City was going to be hiring a zero waste manager. So also another key is meeting Build. Build is a local organization that works on organizing on the vacancies in their neighborhoods. So they meet in congregations, and they've fundraised, and they've been able to do a couple of projects by fundraising money and just taking on blight that's in their community and in their neighborhood affecting them. So connecting with the folks that are already doing this work was really important. And then I was also able, after meeting the Build Reuse folks and attending, I came back the following year and presented on the Baltimore work that I've been doing for our zero waste deconstruction ordinance. And then that same month, in this past October, I was able to present it to our Office of Sustainability. They meet monthly, and I was able to be invited in to present on this deconstruction ordinance. And then at the end of the year in December, so the Plan Our Baltimore Planning Commission meetings were taking place since May. And then at the end, they had a big community conference. And then I was able to see that the recommendations I made it in to the official recommendations and being brought up and talked about by community members that showed up to participate. So seeing that in action, seeing that showing up in community, speaking up and organizing and advocating, and seeing them make the official recommendations showed that I'm on the right path. So here we are in 2023. I also attend a lot of presentations that educate me on the opportunities, so that way I can continue to educate others on the opportunities in the build reuse economy. I learned a lot about gypsum wallboard. So that's from NUMOA, the Northeast Waste Management Officials Association. And everything that I am talking about, I will be sharing resources at the end of this presentation with clickable links for you guys. And yeah, so leaving it off with March, where we are right now. We are in our solid waste management plan. They are taking public comment on the next 10-year plan, which I'll be showing up for to continue to advocate for these policies. And then we have an anticipated introduction this summer with Councilwoman Odette Ramos. So moving on, why Baltimore is right for deconstruction ordinance. So we're talking about the biggest piece of the waste pie, the big kahuna of waste, targeting the construction and demolition resources in the waste stream, also known as the resource stream. So 319,000 annual tons, and we were able to take that from our Less Waste, Better Baltimore plan. And then Baltimore's landscape, just further painting the picture of the history of Baltimore, what the current situation is. And so 17,000 vacant homes, that number goes up and down. It fluctuates daily, weekly, depending on projects. Our population just under 600,000, 20% in poverty. So I put that in there just to outline that there's a need for workforce development and just how this is a policy that is good for people, planet, and in the local economy in multiple ways. 7% of Baltimore City is labeled as vacant as a city. However, some neighborhoods have up to 32% just in one neighborhood. So contributing to polite, illegal dumping, illegal activity, and safety risk for the community, constantly advocating why deconstruction would help at all of these intersections. So next, I want to show off the existing ecosystem. And this is not a complete comprehensive list. These are just the few that that stick out. And there's more to come. And if there's anyone here attending that knows more, like, please feel free to reach out so I can get this more updated. So just wanted to shout out to Second Chance, as their name implies. They give materials and people a second chance. And they're the ones saying if the Rebuild Act were to pass, they would double their current members of employment within a year. The loading dock is a building materials reuse facility, offers great deals and interesting finds to people who need inexpensive building materials and are interested in keeping materials out of the waste or the resource stream. Habitat for Humanity, locally it's the Restore. You may have some of those where you are. It's a home improvement store, donation center, selling new, gently used furniture, appliances, home goods, building materials, and more. Brick and Board, passionate about harnessing salvage industry towards meaningful social impact, creating skilled living wage green collar jobs for Baltimoreans with barriers to employment, making sure that every last shard of vintage building material ends up in their shop and not in the landfill. And it means training a new generation of sawyers, salvage experts, craftspeople right here in Baltimore. Housework Salvage is an architectural salvage business, reclaims historic building pieces like ornamental plaster, woodwork, fireplaces, Palladian windows. Really want to highlight and uplift Black Women Build Baltimore. They are a home ownership and wealth building initiative that provides affordable homes to Black women by restoring vacant and deteriorated houses in West Baltimore. Community Forklift is turning the waste stream into a resource stream for local communities. They value reuse, repurpose, and redistribute. And so that's something that's in the nearby Baltimore community. And some of these pictures are taken from projects that I took from the Baltimore City Deconstruction Project. You can see Brick and Board there, details up there for some of the folks that were involved in this project. So the urgency for removal of vacants was highlighted after the house fire tragedy that took the lives of 3 firefighters on January 24th, 2022. And just wanted to take a moment to remember them here. And as this tragedy, after this tragedy, Baltimore City Mayor Brandon Scott issued a 30-day action request, referencing that the mayor has asked city agencies to prioritize this in the next 30 days. So that all city agencies and departments were to provide the city administrator with a full accounting of every effort they are engaged in to reduce the number of vacant properties. The issue with this tragedy here is this was a house fire that caught fire for the second time. It was a vacant house that had caught fire for the second time. So just further highlighting the urgency for the need of removal of vacant buildings. And then as of January 28th, according to the Department of Housing and Community Development Commissioner Alice Kennedy, there were according to her, there were 15,000 vacant houses in Baltimore City. 13,000 of them are vacant properties with private owners. Approximately 1/3 of vacant buildings are already under a transformation, being rehabbed by a private owner, part of a larger redevelopment plan, in court under a vacant building receivership action, being prepared for demolition, or a city-owned vacant available for immediate sale to a qualified buyer to rehab. So the city has worked to identify and combine funding sources, which has led to progress, reducing the overall number of vacants. And we are ready to redouble our efforts and look for ways to advance the goal of mitigating nuisance properties and holding derelict property owners accountable. And that is a quote from the Housing Commissioner, Alice Kennedy. All right, moving on. So now we're transitioning to the tenets of the bill and what our focus is with our bill language. So as it indicates, the Rebuild Act, recovering Baltimore's underutilized inventory of lots and dwellings. So prioritizing homes and government buildings before 1970, just because we know that's when the building material supply stream was a little bit more valuable then. There will be significant increases to demolition fees, and which would make deconstruction an incentive for deconstruction. So deconstruction would be cheaper, demolition would be more. There would be a surcharge on C&D waste streams, similar to what we see happening in San Francisco. Establish a deconstruction certification program, set minimum requirements, and establish a small business fund for salvage materials, just to name a few. You can read the full draft of the bill from the rebuildbmore.org, which is our website. I will share with y'all later. We're still accepting feedback as we get ready to submit this and introduce it later this summer. So I'm really wanting to highlight and advocate for the triple bottom line, and how do we also account for the economic and social benefits instead of just the bottom line? How do you place the value on a home? How do you place value on a safe neighborhood and the impact that it has on the community? So it's going to take collaboration with all stakeholders involved. So just further making the economic and social impact of the triple bottom line are jobs. And so this is referencing the city of Charlotte, and thanks to the Institute for Local Self-Reliance for their research into this about the jobs increase, the jobs opportunity when we prioritize deconstruction. So there's just way more jobs available in the reuse and manufacturing, and it really is the holy grail for job creating if we prioritize it. What this slide is showcasing, which I sampled from the Treasure in the Walls report from San Antonio, is there's even more jobs between warehouse and retail that haven't even been researched. More opportunity for small businesses, hiring people, charging more money for reclaimed materials, marketing materials, and there's so much more that is on this graphic that hasn't even been studied yet, would further amplify more jobs in the deconstruction industry than in demolition. This is a slide that I also took from the Treasure in the Walls report. So a recent national survey of the deconstruction industry showed that the total labor income from deconstruction, both indirect and induced, is much more significant than demolitions. So while the average cost to demolish a 1,500 square foot home is around $11,000, deconstruction is about $18,000. Demolition has a much weaker effect on the local economy. the total labor income associated with deconstruction as opposed to demolition is substantial and is nearly 4 times that of demolition. So while demolition may be cheaper, it has a much weaker ripple effect on the local economy. Not included in these estimates are the recovery of costs through the sale of reclaimed material, the indirect impact of more of the total budget going to labor, and that subsequent impact on the local economy. All right, and I'm sure I'll have questions on that later. So moving on, I just want to talk about something that happens here in Baltimore. We call it the Baltimore Protocol, and I'm curious if that happens outside of Baltimore. But here I just want to talk about the environmental impacts and how the dry is an example of contaminating the air, the wet, you're still contaminating the groundwater and the soil. And in Baltimore, they are doing that was developed in 2004, the Baltimore Protocol, and involves covering a structure in plastic and then keeping the structure wet during demolition to minimize dust travel. You know, another concern I have about demolition happening in our neighborhoods is that there's a lack in proper education to nearby residents. And what I mean is in these communities where demolition is happening, we need to be informing residents on what they can do to mitigate lead dust, especially in homes with small children. So I know for a fact, a friend of mine lives in a community where a whole block is being demolished. And I didn't see any education up letting them know and they also have a small child in their home, about what they can do to mitigate the dust, lead dust that is in their community and keeping them safe and educating them on what the precautions they can do. And so that's why deconstruction, again, is just a win for the environment and the impacts it has on the local community. Here, I want to thank Sarah Badiali from Portland, where she researched cities and states that have deconstruction ordinances and listed them on her website. I went ahead and just put population sizes in here just for reference. Her website is thereclamationadministration.com. It's interesting to see that more than just cities do this, but Google, as a company that has 150 properties globally, has a deconstruction ordinance. In San Francisco, under their construction and demolition debris ordinance, C&D debris material removed from a project must be recycled or reused. So no C&D can be transported to or disposed of in a landfill or incinerator or put in a designated trash bin. So no official policy, but this is how they manage their construction and demolition debris. Baltimore's population, like I said, is just under 576,000. So that's where I put population sizes in to see where we would fit in the mix compared to other cities that have one. All right. So just this week, I came across this article and it inspired me to share their results of the renovation of Baltimore's CFG Bank Arena, where their owners decided they would renovate what was already there instead of relocating and building a new building. So it just goes to show the amount of materials saved, I mean, which also is synonymous to the amount of money saved. So saving materials, saving money. This is just a testament to renovation and big developers that it is a smart business decision. I will share the resources to that article later. And let's see. So here's the resources for everything. I'll have clickable links. I'll put it in the chat for you guys. So these are the people and organizations I wanted to give a shout out to and thank them for their leadership and their guidance, their inspiration. Sarah helped with the Portland, Oregon groundbreaking building deconstruction ordinance. The ILSR, Institute for Local Self-Reliance, co-founded by Neil Seldman, huge resource for the Wealth to Waste initiative, and our very own zero waste manager for Baltimore City was a former ILSR employee. Dave Bennick has 30 years of experience building materials reuse experience on over 500 projects in 44 states. He has a sustainable for-profit solution, sustainably managing materials and developing the workforce. Ulster County, I know, is moving forward with their Reuse Innovation Center, led by Dave Binnick. Reaply was one of those organizations I first encountered when I attended the Build Reuse conference. They have an online platform for resources sharing, and I was really inspired by their innovation because they've created an online place to list out where projects are happening, what materials are coming, and then folks and people that are looking for materials can research them, find where they are, and get them. And the biggest key here is when materials are reclaimed and they sit, you're paying to store, whereas this is getting resources in the hands of their next owner immediately. They're being listed, you know that it's coming, and as soon as it becomes available and as soon as it comes deconstructed, it's available for purchase right away. Moving on to its next site. The Northeast Waste Management Officials Association, where I got a lot of information and education from them too. San Antonio report, the Charlotte report, the Fast Company article was the picture of the article I just shared with you guys. I do want to stop here with one precautionary tale about something I learned about that happened both on the West Coast and the East Coast. And if pursuing an ordinance in your city, oftentimes there's like a short list of people to work with that do deconstruction. And so the precautionary tale I have is making sure that the company is competitive with demolishers. And so the opportunity is for demolishers to transition to deconstruction, and that there's no tax deduction that would compete with, if you're doing it in a nonprofit model, that would compete with the way that I've seen Dave Binnick advocate for his for-profit business. So the precautionary is just that be aware of a short list where it requires you to use people that aren't verified. I know there's been some incidences with tax audits, and I'll leave it with that. If anyone has any questions, I can go more into that. So that's it for my presentation. Thanks again to Gretchen for the invitation. That's what we've done here in Baltimore. So I will say what's next before we end. This is all my contact information. What's next is our introduction of the bill, scheduled in the summer of 2023. And then continuing to do deconstruction stakeholder meetings. I constantly get people reaching out with interest. And so I'm just seeing more and more opportunities to continue networking and meeting with people. I've also been able to partner with Morgan State University. The School of Architecture professor has reached out to me, and we are interested in planning a deconstruction expo. So stay tuned. We're going to be putting some ideas to work, making some models, connecting the community, and we have a plan for that later in the fall. So that's it. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And as promised, I'll put some of those clickable links in the chat. And I'll take any questions.
Thank you so much, Steph, for that very comprehensive presentation and for all the work that you've done. It's a lot. I guess my takeaways were the importance of local partnerships, importance of persistence, the attention to the context of the region, and researching and communicating the many benefits of deconstruction. And kind of along those lines, I just wanted to ask my own question before we get to everybody else's. Perks of being a moderator. How big is your team?
What?
Are you?
Good question.
Yeah.
So here when I started, I had Dante with me. So Dante with the research, he's first and policy whiz, and he got it started. So we were a team of two, and now it's I'm the only one in Baltimore. Yeah. So that's why I really am relying on the collaboration. I am my passion is zero waste. My strengths are community organizing and bringing people together. So I really rely on those organizing moments to bring those stakeholders in and have those stakeholders bring more people in. I really rely on that network of collaboration.
Yeah, I just find that amazing that you're just pushing through on your own. Not on your own,
Well,
but
and yeah,
like
yeah. Well, and that's why I reached out to Sarah. She's offered me support. So I do have experts I'm able to reach out and lean on. And for the most part, I'm just facilitating the conversations and just show up in the city, show up to advocate.
Okay, audience questions. I got some questions through direct message, so I'm also going to read those out. First question from Khalil Pirani. What are the major challenges faced in the formation of an ordinance in Baltimore?
Major challenges. So at this point, I'm still in communication with our Department of Housing and Community Development, because as the way that the language of the bill is really having them manage it. And so I really need to get their support and buy-in for this. So early on in the beginning, they were a part of the conversation with me, gave me some feedback. I was able to ask some questions. Is this feasible? Is this going to work? And, they've done, like I said, this project has happened before. Now it's just working on getting a mandate that requires it. So really just needing to get the people that are going to be in charge of it on board.
Next question, also from Khalil. What are the other cities that have adopted such an ordinance? You kind of went over that already, so I'm going to, I guess you can reiterate it.
I can go over that again.
Yeah.
So let me look at that real quick. Let me pull up my slide. I'm not going to share. I'm just going to tell you. And also, I also need to put that in the chat. The rebuildbmore.org website has a bunch of references there. So the cities, you know what? I did breeze over that. So let me go over that. San Antonio, they just passed theirs this past September. So shout out to Stephanie Phillips. She was also someone that I met working for the city of San Antonio. I've met her at the first Build Reuse conference. And so it's been great to see them. Like I said, I borrowed a lot of the information from their report, The Treasure in the Walls. And if you check the chat, I just put that link to the Treasure in the Walls report. So much good information there. So it was really good to connect with her, and congratulations to them on getting their ordinance passed this past September. So it was San Antonio, Charlotte, North Carolina, Portland, Oregon, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and there's Palo Alto in California. And then I know San Francisco is in the process, as well as Baltimore. So, I was just talking with an architect today who reached out to me, who I love when people reach out to me, because I see that the work is going somewhere. So they had a lot of good questions. And one of his questions was, who else is working on doing it? And I was like, good question. I don't know. So maybe you guys know what other cities are doing this. All I can report on is, as I know, Baltimore's working on it, and San Francisco at this point. Despite
Boston
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I've heard that Boston is also trying to push something right now.
Okay.
And actually, Build Reuse is quick plug for Build Reuse, but Build Reuse is building a wiki right now, and one of the wiki pages is on policy. And we're trying to compile a comprehensive list of all the different deconstruction and construction and demolition waste policies out there.
I love that. It sounds like I need to be a member.
Yeah, join Build Reuse. Yeah, related question from Marianne. I'm just skipping ahead because it's similar. What is the source for the cities, states, and companies with deconstruction ordinances that you referenced?
Oh yeah, I pulled that from the reclamationadministration.com website. And that was the work done by CR0WD. She put that together. And all I did was add the population sizes for reference.
And then another question from Khalil. For an ordinary homeowner, are there any savings for going the deconstruction route versus regular demolition?
So ask me that question again. For homeowners,
yes.
Is there any savings?
Yeah, exactly.
So, and that's kind of like where my precautionary tale came from at the end, was it seems like it's kind of wrapped up in tax write-offs. But from my research, I've learned that maybe there's some appraisers or maybe there's some businesses that will do it. Maybe they overvalue that. And then you submit because they tell you how much it's worth. And then you, the homeowner, then submit. But then later on, when they get an audit, they realize, oh, they severely overvalued this. And it's like kind of like a scam that some businesses have done. So I'm not going to call anyone out or name any names, but I feel like this is something that needs to be brought up, because I think it's something that has happened in more than one, like I said, East and West Coast. So that is the precautionary tale about homeowners and the incentives around taxes. So when I talked to Dave Bennick, which I love his work and his reuse innovation centers and advocate for him and his expertise, he's really making a good case for his for-profit business and how he just really competes with demolition. He's changing the narrative that it shouldn't be more expensive. It's equal work. He's able to make it work. He's able to compete with demolition and do a good job and reclaim materials and train people into managing these materials. So I just can't reference him enough.
Question from Neil Seldman. The
Hey,
draft Baltimore 10-year swim plan has no requirement for deconstruction. Will someone try to add this requirement in the plan?
You know I am, Neil. I'm showing up. I got the announcement that those plans are happening for public comment, so I will be there. Thanks for reminding me, Neil. But yeah, I will be showing up to advocate for that there for sure.
Question from, I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce this right, but Najee. Hi, this is Najee from the Just Places Lab. My questions are certifications and training for deconstruction offered for construction workers in Baltimore? Who offers the training? And how is the curriculum developed?
Great questions. So that is something that I'm advocating for with another stakeholder, which is I've identified as the Mayor's Office of Employment Development, like really advocating this is an opportunity for jobs trainings. So I do know what has happened. And I do know that there was some workforce development. There was a program that happened last fall. And what I can say is there's no better way to learn how to build a house than to take one down. And that's the story that's being told. So, so with the passing of a deconstruction ordinance, the labor would increase, the jobs would increase. And so I really am working on those two big city agencies to really collaborate on this and make it work, because it's a solution that is managing the housing and managing the opportunities we need for work and skilled jobs. So I know that some trainings have happened. And I know that it was involved with the Black Women Build Baltimore, like more examples of that, more stories of people getting access to training and doing the work that needs to be done here in the city to transform our landscape. So who is doing it? It would be the Office of Employment Development, and then other opportunities like that to exist. So did I answer the question? Was there another point to that, another part of that question?
I think you answered it pretty well.
Okay, thank you.
How was the data provided? Oh, this is from Gretchen. How is the data provided for annual Baltimore CDD tonnage, or who provided it? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, keep going. Yeah, I don't think I got it all.
Yeah, in New York State, it has been challenging gathering useful data like this that we can be confident in.
Oh, like the tonnage report?
Mm-hmm.
I got that from the Less Waste Better Baltimore plan. So they're I guess consultants that weighed in on that put that together, and I was able to pull that from their document, which is also from the solid waste management plan.
A question from Paul. What is the reference of the labor income slide? Those values are very compelling to make the case for deconstruction versus demolition.
Absolutely. Again, I took that from Treasure and Walls, and I think I got that link in the chat. And I think So there's a difference between like the page and the PDF page, and it's either 39 or 42, if you wanted to reference the Treasure in the Walls report. So yeah, the resources, all the links showed up. I'm just looking at it right now.
Question from Mary Ann. What is the source of the city, states? Oh, wait, we already went over that one. Question from Gretchen. How are you soliciting public feedback for the deconstruction ordinance draft? And what stakeholder engagement work do you anticipate having to happen once the ordinance has been introduced this summer by the councilwoman?
Ooh, great question. Thank you for that. So the way that it exists right now is it's online on our website. Oh, you know what? I need to share those links. Pause for a second so I can get those links. I can quit saying in this link. Yeah, it's online, available right now, where you can click on it and you can add your comments to it there. Hang on, here it is. It's coming. So it is like a Google Doc at this point that folks can submit their comments on. And then we'll be planning out more stakeholder meetings, education and outreach for that. We'll have to keep going for sure. But for now, I'm still wanting to get more feedback from all of the stakeholders. There's plenty of room for more input. And stakeholders are slowly coming out of the woodwork. So call the stakeholders, check out the Rebuild Act. And I just put those links in there to our website. Everything is referenced there on rebuildbmore.org. You can read the.
Neil asks, what does a deconstruction worker at Second Chance earn?
Oh, good question. Off the top of my head, I want to say starting at $17 an hour. I don't have the facts to back that up, but that's where my head wants. That's what my head wants to say. So let me come back to you, Neil.
Then I got a question. Will a recording be available to us? Gretchen, could you answer that question?
Yes, we are recording this and we send it out to everyone who's registered for tonight. So you should receive a direct link in the next week to 10 days. And you can also go on to our crowd website and see recordings of all the past crowd conversations. Thanks for asking.
And then Jenny asks, thanks for the great talk. Do you see a certain scale of developer or property owner that is more likely to deconstruct in Baltimore prior to adoption of the ordinance? Also, why did you pick 1970 as the cutoff date for the ordinance?
Oh, so I'll ask the last question first. Because in our research of materials used at that time, that it was more valuable materials or materials that still had value after they went through the deconstruction process. So, and also when it comes to evaluating a site for deconstruction, there's like a minimum amount that's salvageable. So, weighing out the safety and the workload to make sure that if the projects that get picked have to meet a requirement for how much is salvageable in it. And so I think that was just like a starting place to kind of like define the scope. But there's still like room for interpretation on what that looks like. And what was the first part of the question? What was the percentage of people that are already doing?
Do you see a certain scale of developer or property owner that is more likely to deconstruct in Baltimore prior to adoption of the ordinance?
So prior to adoption, right? Because right now you can choose to do it, right? And that's the point of the ordinance, is to mandate it. So I'm going to answer this question the best way I know how. And it's an opportunity for folks that believe in the mission of zero waste, that believe in the mission of environmental justice and social justice, and not wanting to take the road that's less traveled. So the opportunity, businesses are already doing it. It's already happening. The future is now. It's not years from now. It's already happening. So the folks that are motivated to do it are doing it. Different conditions exist will impact the likability and feasibility for it to take place, but that's the best way I know how to answer that question.
And then Jenny also asked, are there issues in adopting an ordinance in a city with demolitions from vacancy abandonment? versus cities like San Antonio or Portland with demolitions from redevelopment pressure?
Oh, that's a good question. Can you ask me that again? That's a long
Yeah,
question. That's
sure.
a long-winded question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there issues in adopting an ordinance in a city with demolitions from vacancy abandonment versus cities like San Antonio or Portland with demolitions from redevelopment pressure?
Oh, I understand the difference between a rehab or renovation versus just like an abandoned property. So I think that's also one of the obstacles that we face here in Baltimore, is that a big part of our landscape are those vacant housings that are so derelict. So that is something that is an obstacle that we need to figure out a solution for. But that's why the business like Brick and Board showed up. They were there reclaiming the two most valuable items and that was only available. Everything else was gone. There wasn't a roof on these buildings, but Brick and Board was still there, and that was what was salvageable. So there's still opportunities with the minimum that is left behind, is the best way to answer that question.
And then I think last question from Kathy, is the state providing support for your work in Baltimore? If yes, would like to learn more.
Yes. So the details, the Baltimore City Deconstruction Project in 2018 was state funded. So projects have been funded. And I know that, this is a city policy. And so ideally, we do want to see this as something that is throughout the state. So to answer the question, I know that other projects were passed, and that's something that I'll definitely be continuing to work on too. State funding for sure.
Great. Okay, I think that's it for questions. Does anybody else have last minute questions? If not, I think we can wrap up.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. And I am a zero waste expert and not like a building expert. So I did my best to answer your questions, and I hope I was helpful tonight, and it's given me more inspiration on how to best prepare for those questions next time.
Yeah, I think that was great. And thank you for the resources also that you put in the chat.
Cool.
Yeah, very helpful. Okay, guess that's it for today. Thank you all for joining. The next crowd conversations will be on Monday, April 3rd. And May Boley, as Gretchen said, will be presenting on female-focused workforce development and opportunities offered by the deconstruction program at Repurpose Savannah. So we hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.